for true. Yeah, I mistook life for true. Yeah, I took life for true.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a thrilling journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted territories of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the intricate tapestries of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean.
And welcome back for episode
26.
26, people. We're 6 months into podcasting.
Half of the 52 weeks.
Other words.
Half a year.
Yeah.
6 months. You're right.
26.
20. Whoa. So today we're going to do another Secret History episode.
Yeah, mostly. Mostly. I think we got some tough. Well, we finished the previous chapter we gone over in the Ghost in the Machine episode. We kind of got into it. It kind of fit perfectly into the topics of reincarnation, and then the connection between the kind of existential ChatGPT, early days of ChatGPT when it was off its leash a little bit.
We weren't sure what to call that last. Well, we came up with it in the show, right?
Yeah, pretty sure
we came up with the Ghost in the Machine.
Ghost in the Machine.
It could have been called Secret History of the World Part 6.
Could.
So now we're not sure what to call this one.
I mean, it was kind of like half.
Maybe we're going to go like 6.5 because it's kind of a 6, but it's kind of a 7.
Yeah. Ghost in the Machine was 0.5, and we get 0.5, 1.5 here.
Right.
I guess it would be 1 here. Anyway.
So we got some other little bits that we'd like to cover before we hop into that, I think.
Yeah, I'm interested in the quantum internet. I see there.
Yeah, so this is an article I found, and I don't even remember how I found it, but
it's in Nature.
This is a Nature article.
That's probably how. I got an email about it.
I mean, I don't just sit there and browse Nature articles all day, so
no, but maybe it was in 1440.
Oh, that's probably exactly what it was. Yeah,
because I've clicked on it. Sent me to Nature before too.
So this is an interesting idea where they're essentially trying to use quantum entanglement in order to increase internet speeds.
Regular internet speeds?
Yeah. So that if you essentially have like entangled particles on two sides, you don't need to send the transmission through the line. You can just do something with the particle and observe it on the other side and get
instant feedback. Right.
And this article is about like they've actually done a test of this.
Successfully?
Yeah, it's still obviously really limited. But like the proof of concept is proving out.
Like they can send data, because then you can assign movements, right, to a particle to be translated by a computer. And then, like what I'm saying, like, is that what they're doing? Is they're basically like assigning data points to like, I guess I guess it would have to be a quantum computer, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I must have read the summary from the 1440 because now that I'm clicking on this link, I don't actually have access to Nature. So I can't get past the paywall here. I mean, I'm sure I could come up with a way to do it, but not on the spot as we're recording.
Maybe you can try going to the email.
Here's like the first paragraph that I can read says 3 separate research groups have demonstrated quantum entanglement in which 2 or more objects are linked so that they contain the same information even if they're far apart over several kilometers of existing optical fibers in real urban areas. The feat is a key step towards a future quantum internet, a network that could allow information to be exchanged while encoded in quantum states. Oh,
Interesting.
I think, yeah, maybe that's what they were talking about. So like you're actually sending the information, like it's almost like quantum encryption or something. I don't know.
So I guess what they're telling
like
is they're encrypting it, so they're having it on both sides of they're having the same information on both sides.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
I read this a few weeks ago and I didn't refresh myself on it. So I think it's coming back to me now. I think what they were talking about is it's like essentially like a security measure too.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So that like,
I'm thinking normally, like blockchain
normally if
levels.
you send a message from one computer to another, if you were to put some sort of device in the network in between that split off that data so you could capture all the data that's going across that wire, either end of that transaction has no idea that it happened.
Right.
Whereas with this quantum system, if someone were to input themselves into that in order to siphon off data, it could break the quantum encryption. It would break the entanglement, and you could essentially detect when someone is like snooping on your signal.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's like almost like a different level of like the blockchain, like idea of the blockchain, like security.
Yeah, yeah.
But you have everything kind of separated.
Right, but knowing, like, imagine just being able to know for sure that, like, hey, someone tampered with that message you sent someone.
Know for sure,
and
yeah.
you know for sure, right?
Yeah, instead of it, I'm sure our information is being siphoned all the time. We know that,
it definitely is. We know that from Edward Snowden.
So then I guess the question would be, what, like, you would have to figure out how to define the type of information, because you would almost have to be like like what they're saying early on, like right now, is that the information has to be the same on either side.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, like unless you're I guess you're transmitting it from one to the other, but if it's quantum, like I don't understand how having.
Well, it's entangled. So if you create an entangled pair and you send one across a fiber optic wire, if anything changes on that, the pair that you keep will change as well. So you know if anyone's messing or manipulating your data.
Okay. So you're saying that, so basically the idea is to like create like a key, like your particle key, that the particles that are being sent back and forth, it's like your key, you have the key to it, it's yours, you have the access to it.
Yeah, you would be able to know if even a single bit of your message got flipped.
I'm thinking like, I'm imagining like a quantum, like when quantum computers are like in every home, and you have like a quantum computer and it sending messages is no longer like what we have, like little bits. It's just it's particles being sent to another quantum computer, and that quantum computer knows what that particle, the information on that particle. So you're always getting alerts, like you have like your security app up on your desktop.
Yeah. And
it just says, ding, something happened here. And then you can, your data is secure because you can have it come right back.
Right.
And be like, okay, now maybe that pathway.
Or maybe you just know like, hey, we got to switch encryption keys or whatever.
You know, to like, change your password.
Like,
and even on a quantum computer, maybe that's as easy as, I don't know, a phrase that you talking to your computer at that point, or whatever, that you know only, or a look, or a, some biological key.
Also, if things are a little different sounding today, we're trying a different recording setup here. I can already tell, and you're going to have to be careful because the mics are mounted to your desk. So every time you tap, it's popping vibrations, sir. So
you'll catch those? You
got to be gentle. Not to make you walk on the eggshells, but
it's all right.
And then this one, again, this is one of the ones I added to the show prep a while ago, so I haven't watched it in a while. But this is a video from Anton Petrov, and I'm not going to play it just because there's not like a single moment in it. But did we actually talk about that?
I think we talked about that one.
Okay, then never mind.
Unless we talked about it off air, I'm not sure.
We might have.
We'd have to go back.
But
we can save that for another time.
I'll drop the link in the show notes anyway if you guys are interested. But essentially, this video is talking about how the LIGO and other gravitation wave observatories, they're finding new ways to like measure gravity waves traveling, and one of the ways is by looking at pulsars out in the universe. Pulsars are one of the, like, they call them like apparently some of them spin so fast and so like perfectly on time that they're more accurate than our most accurate quantum computers or quantum clocks that we build here on Earth.
Wow.
And so they use them as like candlesticks to like look out, and if you're looking and measuring these pulsars all around you, you can tell when space-time itself is shifting with gravitational waves passing through, because it will slightly offset the timing.
It'll distort the timing.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And because they're so fast and you can depend on it at a certain rhythm, right?
Yeah. So essentially we have confirmation now through this method. And if you watch the video, he's like, no, this is like really like high confidence level confirmation. It's basically proof that like the universe is constantly humming with gravity waves. Like as if you were like in a boat on the ocean. Like you're never going to be in a boat on the ocean where there's not waves. Right. And basically it's the same case for us in the universe. The fabric of space-time is constantly waving.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I wonder, is this something that they've been studying and it's like slowly been released to the point where they're now talking about it? Or is it like it's well known, or is this like a breakthrough?
It's a recent published paper.
Okay. So it's been researched for a while, but it's not published. Now it's published.
Right. Okay. LIGO was the first thing that detected gravity waves.
And they're looking at multiple pulsars, or
yeah, they're looking at their database of like the most like
wide data set that they can get, probably.
And they're using, observations from telescopes all over and like, syncing up the data in order to see all directions, so you can see what way a wave is coming from or whatever.
Yeah.
But they said these are like really,
so they're happening in, it's not like a uniform wave.
It's not. It's like a rippling ocean. If you think about it,
it's coming from all. So it's
coming from
disturbances everywhere. Unless it's just like a natural wave, or it's just constant disturbances all over. Like we're probably creating some too.
Yeah, well,
in our region.
So the other half of the video is talking about
like what creates them.
And there's I think they put forward 3 main theories, and one of them, there was a couple that I can't remember off the top of my head that they said weren't super likely. But they said the one that they have the most confidence in at the moment is just essentially orbiting black holes, like binary black hole pairs.
Creates it.
As they get closer and closer, their effect on each other and the space in between them is sending out these rippling waves. And so everywhere in the universe that has these orbiting,
they're coming from that
black
direction.
holes, they're all coming from different directions. And just like if you drop a rock on 2 sides of a pool, you'll have these nice rings, right? Until they interact with each other and they have the interference patterns between them. So when you have it coming from all over the place, it'll look more like random waves because they're interfering so much.
Now we need to study what the interference patterns might do and how much of an effect it has. Like I know in the video, I think now that I'm remembering, I think we did cover it, or we talked about it at least off the air, but they're saying it's so minuscule, like the effect it has.
Right.
Like you might be shifting your atoms like a small amount.
Right.
But it's not having huge effects on us, obviously, because we noticed that. But
obviously, the closer you are to one of those, events, like you would feel that more, and it could have more of an offsetting effect.
Yeah, the wave will have a different amplitude and all that.
Right. But
might have a different effect. My shifting's further which would be crazy. Imagine getting hit by a gravity wave that pulls your atoms apart because one part of the wave is going one direction, another part of the wave is going a different direction.
Right. That'd be crazy.
I mean, that's basically like theoretically right what would happen if it's able to shift.
It would
atoms
have to have the right amplitude and the right
frequency
and the right direction, but
you'd have to be like caught in like a one that's
like a
pulling
divergence.
You in, you'd basically have to be the black hole. So, never mind. But
I mean, just like waves in the ocean can sink ships, right? But
yeah, if you hit a convergence of waves on the ocean and it's just like super turbulent, that happens.
Right.
Yeah. So fascinating.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's cool stuff. But I guess the reason I brought it up on the podcast is because it just makes me think of like creation myths and like the idea of like, you know, speaking the universe into existence and that everything being vibration.
Yeah.
And like,
even gravity now.
Even gravity itself. Right.
And time and all these things that we experience.
So now we've got essentially three major types. You know, we've got pressure waves with sound and everything. We've got, you know, electromagnetic and gravitational, and all of those things are happening all around us all the time.
It's crazy to think because with the like when we talked about like previously, like earlier on in the Secret History of the World stuff, the idea of the sun god roaring in the lion, you know, the depiction of the lion roaring life into and roaring, you know, basically creating, you know, material stuff out of his voice.
Right.
Is the idea, and like how that kind of like if we're talking about like esoteric, like ancient history and their knowledge and the way that they thought of things and the way that they described things.
Well, yeah,
you still
especially
have to start
and like
somewhere.
the way
like,
they
it
pass
didn't come
it
out of
down.
a vacuum, you know?
Right. The way they pass that knowledge down, right? So like there are times, you know, like if this like lost civilization, you know, pre-Ice Age or back in the Ice Age existed and was advanced, then we know the period after that, between then and now, like there was, you know, some pretty primitive times, right?
Yeah. And we're talking advanced in their knowledge.
Right.
Not necessarily advanced in the way people want to describe people who like us and other people when they say advanced, and like Graham Hancock. He doesn't just mean they had technology. He says they're advanced in their understanding of the cosmos.
Right.
And
You're comparing them to the standard model scientific view of early humans, which is that they are all hunter-gatherers.
Right. And they're all primitive in their thinking as well as their technology.
Right. So anyway, you could see how like someone who does have a more advanced knowledge of how the universe works, trying to pass on that knowledge through systems that ultimately have to go through oral traditions, right? You could see converting, like, how could you explain gravitational waves to someone like who doesn't even understand light waves, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So the best thing you could do is like the most primitive understanding of waves. The first discovery you're going to have of waves is like ocean waves, which is just a different form of sound waves, right? It's just a different frequency. Those are all pressure waves, right? So you can explain a pressure wave. You can explain speaking. It's still vibration. It's still frequency, right? So it's a decent metaphor. So saying that, you know, something was spoken into existence, you know, sounds, you know, whatever form those propagating waves take, you know, now we know gravitational waves can be one of them.
Exactly. And another aspect of that whole thing is the I lost my train of thought. It was gonna be no, I lost it.
That's okay. You want to move on?
Yeah, we're gonna go. What we got? We are gonna play a little clip from
this video. Just came
Bright
out
Insight
from Bright Insight, which if you haven't followed his YouTube channel, you really should. He's got some great stuff. He's
definitely.
He's not always my style to listen to, but
still got good information.
He does a pretty good job like digging and finding obscure bits of information that I haven't heard before.
He digs up a lot of like lesser known stuff, and he doesn't upload terribly a lot either. Like he uploads like every few months, it seems.
Right.
Even.
It's like
he puts a lot of thought and effort into each video, and they're usually like an hour,
research
like
on
documentary length.
So this is a shorter one. This is only 22 minutes, and he just recently posted it. And this is about Gobekli Tepe and updating on Gobekli Tepe. And so if you aren't aware of Gobekli Tepe, it's the now famous, oldest structures.
Man-made structures.
Well, I guess stone structures. I'm sure. I don't know what we have.
Well, they characterized it as megalithic based on the pillars and sides.
It's megalithic. It's the oldest megalithic discovery, like that we have like a known date on it. Because previous to Gobekli Tepe, the understanding was that Sumeria was the first civilization that was building, out of stone and making megalithic sites, right? But
here we have Gobekli Tepe, which is dated to 11,600 years ago, and that's what they've dug up so far.
Right.
They have done LiDAR scans of the region, and there's two separate sites on the same hill. Gobekli Tepe is like a huge thing, but what they have dug up is like two separate sites, and they scan the whole hill, and they've only uncovered like 70 something of the pillars.
Yeah, so
there's like 200 and something more.
We've talked about it before. There's tons of these tepes all around Turkey.
Yeah, Karahan Tepe and Gobekli Tepe.
There's like a couple dozen of them that have been discovered so far. Most of them have not been excavated.
And there's one other, I think Karahan Tepe is the one that they dated to be a couple hundred years older than Gobekli Tepe. But again, they still haven't dug down. And they haven't even excavated. They've excavated 5 to 10% of the site, and probably less at Karahan Tepe, maybe more. I don't know exactly how much have done at Karahan Tepe. But Gobekli Tepe, they definitely haven't gotten deep enough.
Gobekli Tepe is this entire hillside, and based on the ground penetrating radar that's been done, like the understanding is that most likely the entire hillside is
covered in it. Is the site.
Is the site, right. Yeah. And you would have to remove the material off the entire thing. Yeah. So now we're talking like a treasure trove of archaeology, like the biggest freaking find. The absolute matter of fact oldest buildings, and they're megalithic.
And they can only get older too.
Right. And so you would think archaeologists would be having a freaking field day with this. You would think like all archaeology money and funding around the world would be funding people to dig this site and all the different tepes. It's a freaking wealth of information about the oldest known like megalithic building humans
and the people there. Yeah,
there's so much there for us to learn. We have such a small picture of that time period. Unfortunately, this video comes along,
but also unfortunately, it's challenging. It's challenging and it's potentially lending credence to the Bible or religious texts, or like that could be something that they're worried about. Anyway, let's play this.
So
this is new information being dug up by Bright Insight by what's his name? I can't remember.
So this part that I'm going to play isn't exactly the new information. Well, some of it is new to me.
It's new to me, and it's new to him too. And he's kind of claiming that he's the one that's talking about it and like putting this out there.
We'll talk about the newer part, and you should watch the video to get his full break on it. But like essentially, if you've seen pictures of what Gobekli Tepe looks like, they have erected these roofs, these like structures over the top to like prevent like rain or weathering.
Since they've uncovered it, they don't want it to be damaged. Yeah,
right. Which I understand that.
Well, originally, and it'll talk about it in this, but originally it was all built in such a way that it wouldn't do any harm to any further excavations and any further,
Right,
work
so-
being done there.
But if you look at the photos of this thing, it's crazy. So we'll pop some of the
Originally,
videos.
yeah, is what I mean.
Yeah,
Originally
yeah.
when they put the tent up. But now they're doing more permit stuff. So
Yeah, so check this out.
As was described in their agenda, the first steps involved in the 20-year partnership was setting up the infrastructure for tourism and preservation, which included protective roofs in order to prevent weather and the elements from affecting this now exposed site. However, notice that the very foundation and support beams of this roof is comprised of, what it's comprised of is literally stabbing into the ruins itself. But more than that, notice in these various images, including different angles around the site, clearly show that the permanent viewing platform is not only obstructing the view of different parts of the site, which is a bit ironic, but more importantly, it is quite literally impeding the site from being fully excavated, as it's sitting directly on top of portions of the site that have not yet been dug. In fact, observe the walkway that surrounds the entire area, and notice that it's covering areas which still contain buried ruins, which we know from previous use of ground penetrating radar scans. And by the way, here's a question. When exactly were these two orchards of trees, which are located in the midst of ruins of Gobekli Tepe, when were they planted? Because I found an aerial photograph from 2004, and as you can see, these two sets of orchards were not there at this time as compared to a more recent photo. Do any ancient ruins lie underneath these orchards? I mean, that is a sincere question, as I do not know if that is the case or not. However, considering we're talking about a total excavation area that's as large as 90 football fields, it would seem that these two sets of roofs and walkways that surround them clearly only make up a small fraction of that 22 acres. And speaking of walkways, it's worth mentioning that there are a total of 900 meters of walkways that were constructed here after this partnership began. And not to mention the roads that were literally built on top of, and in fact, even destroyed ruins at this site. And get this, the wife of the late archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who was the prestigious German professor who first began excavations at Gobekli Tepe until he unfortunately passed away in 2014, but his widow was an archaeologist herself, and she was invited to tour the new facilities at Gobekli Tepe in 2018. And what she witnessed upset her deeply and ended up garnering worldwide outrage when it was reported. When Mrs. Schmidt visited Gobekli Tepe, she was mortified to see that the use of heavy equipment and asphalt roads and concrete sidewalks had destroyed parts of this ancient site. She was even quoted as saying, "They call it a road, I call it destruction," or the other way around, and went on to say that they are doing everything in a rush that Klaus did not want, as he knew it would destroy Gobekli Tepe, and that she cannot begin to explain the extent of the destruction which she witnessed that morning. She said, and I quote, "My sorrow is hard to articulate. Every time I visit there, I see another fragmentation coming to light." And went on to say that as part of the construction of a protective roof, parts of the wooden walkway have been removed on the assumption that they would be put back later. However, now they are building a permanent concrete walkway instead, she said. And she took it upon herself to share photos on her Instagram and what had taken place. And thankfully, public outrage ensued as these photos circulated the internet, causing massive controversy.
So we'll leave it there for now. Watch the video here. I'll have the link here. That's a freaking outrage.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous.
And we knew about this because Graham had been complaining about this.
Yeah.
So that's not the new part to me.
No.
The new part was that I hadn't heard that Klaus
Schwab.
Schmidt.
Klaus Schmidt.
Yeah, Klaus Schmidt's wife
had gone there.
Had gone there, and I that is news to me. The other part
Klaus
that's
Schwab, too.
right. The other part that's news is he did some digging and he found some involvement between the people running the site and building the structures and the World Economic Forum. Which, if you haven't looked into, and we haven't gone super deep conspiracy on them yet, which we need to do
mentioned it though.
But the World Economic Forum is one of these like organizations that is essentially trying to control the world. They're trying to control leaders and business leaders and government leaders and implement policies
to get to their ends.
Klaus Schwab is the president of it, and he is the one that's famous for saying you will own nothing and be happy.
Right. And then and their whole like 2030 plan, right? They have this whole plan for how they like in the most recent World Economic Forum, like the actual meeting, they were talking about it, right? So he's got another follow-up video on this with some questions, and I also haven't done the digging to like verify a bunch of this stuff, so I'm not 100% on this theory yet. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I will say is at least with the some of the construction, it's not, I mean, yes, I'm sure they destroyed a bunch of shit, but hopefully it can be removed and redone. And I'm sorry, but like a road to the site should not be destroying the site. Throw some gravel down. Dude, that's all you need. That's all you need. Crazy. And the other thing with he mentioned the orchards there. The orchards, which could... The roots of which could destroy some of the stuff. But they claim that they're there to protect because the roots will protect. They'll keep the soil in place. Yeah. But again, it's been there for how long? 12,000 years. Right. And nothing, like it's in the state that it's in now. So yeah, sure. Eventually it probably would have deteriorated underground. But. Right. And it's likely he has, like in his connections, he's pointing out, he's talking like, so I also knew this too, which from Graham, which was that years back, they had the people in charge of the site had announced that they're going to, leave the site for future generations to be able to do some archaeology on it. Right. They basically said they're not doing any more on it. I mean, not that they're not doing any more, but they're not doing any large scale excavations. Right. So they're still doing like smaller scale excavations on the part that's already exposed. Yeah. But they've barely scratched the surface of this thing. It's the oldest freaking human megalithic site we've ever found, and the entire profession of archaeology, which just uninterested. It's actually turns out it's the World Economic Forum people are coming out and saying, yeah, you know, this amazing archaeologic site that we can learn a million things from. We're not going to do the archaeology on it because plant some orchards. We're going to leave it for people later. That is crazy. That is crazy. Well, yeah. And the kind of argument they make is that like in the past, it could be said that, you know, be a valid statement, but it's, you know, the idea that keeping it buried in the hopes that some new technology will come along and help you better understand what you're doing. Sure. But the thing is but there's so many of these tepes that haven't even been dug into. If you want to leave one, leave one. Some other ones, you know, like, but we've already dug into this one. Why don't we go the rest of the way? Yep. Why don't we find out all that there is to find out about this place? Find out the connection to instead, you're going to build a permanent structure over it. You're going to build roads to it that end up destroying some of the monument. Put trees over with roots that'll do damage. Yeah, it's crazy. Oh my God. I mean, it definitely with Gobekli Tepe. Now that we know that Karahan Tepe's there and all these other tepes, there's no reason to not find one of them and pick one of them and say, let's just dig it all the way out and see what the hell it is. Honestly, like this boils my blood, and I hope it changes, and I think it's going to. It's true, and if there's enough outrage about it, and like I think we're all a part of that by talking about it. Yep, exactly. Then, you know, like honestly, this is like crimes against humanity level stuff. This is insane. Yeah, you're literally burying the past, and you're just going to pretend like we know it's dated so far back that we have no other reference for history. Like, let's fucking find out. Why are we not finding out? Like, who cares what it tells us? Like, let's just find out the truth. Fuck. Right. Who cares about your agenda? Exactly. Oh, man, it's so maddening. Oof. Dude, like imagine if the archaeologists who decided to like uncover the rest of the Sphinx and the pyramids that were like still like covered by a bunch of sand were like, we're just going to take a few feet of the sand out and we're going to leave the rest for future generations. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. What the hell? I guess you could argue that sand is probably a little bit easier to work with, but it doesn't. Just maybe. I don't know. Work with it, uncover it,
set up structures after it's excavated to protect it. Set up temporary ones along the way. Whatever it is, it shouldn't be destructive.
Yeah. No, and there's way less destructive. You could put a freaking tent over it without destroying it.
Yeah.
You don't need this like it's got like sunlights in the roof and stuff. Like it's like this big old massive thing with steel framing and poles digging into the earth.
It's
all literally right on top of it. Like it's not like it's way bigger than the site's uncovered. It's like right on top of the site, like digging into right next to pillars that are being uncovered. Craziness.
Oh man.
Well, let's take a break while we cool off because we're about to send some strongly worded emails to the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. Thanks, Klaus Schwab.
Jesus. We'll be right back.
We'll be back.
We didn't stop bitching about Gobekli Tepe.
We literally were just raging to each other during the break about it.
This makes no fucking sense. Dude. Why? I mean, I'm sure archaeologists, other than Klaus Schmidt's wife, are pissed about this. Mm-hmm. But what can you do, right?
Right.
What can they do? They have no power in this situation.
Well, not like an individual archaeologist, but the big institutions, the government of Turkey, and whoever has control over the site.
Yeah, which now know is the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. So
who clearly and deliberately have plans for the world and has spoken that.
So I normally try not to go totally baseless conspiratorial, and I don't think this is totally baseless, but
you don't always try to go no.
Yeah, that's true. Well, on the podcast.
True.
But dude, fuck it. There's a lot of evidence that there is a group of people in this world who do not want us finding out about this ancient past. They don't want us to know the truth about this stuff. And if anyone's involved in that, people like the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, like these are your natural candidates if you're going to go conspiratorial with this stuff. And I don't know how else to interpret this other than
a chess move.
This looks like someone trying to prevent the world from finding out more.
Yeah. I mean, there's other evidence too. It's not just this type of stuff either. Like they have their hands in all sorts of things around the globe. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a multinational type of group.
Right. And Graham, like when you listen to him and things start going conspiratorial, like he'll always step back from that. And he's like, I'm not saying there's a mass conspiracy. Well, I am. And it's just so maddening, dude.
Well, yeah, especially because you hear that, like, we played the clip to the World Economic Forum, and we like the whole idea of you will own nothing and you will like it, and like they feel that same way about everything in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't they buy everything or be involved in everything and just ultimately make the decision whether to release it or not?
Right.
Whether they're going to eventually release it is still to be determined.
And just look at how little archaeology has been done on Gobekli Tepe and how much we've gotten out of it in our like alternative history sphere, right? The handbags. There's what is it, Pillar 43, which has like
Enclosure D. I remember that. Yeah,
that has
the vulture with the ham and the.
It's got the references to the constellations of the zodiac.
Way back then.
Way back then. Which is crazy also.
Yeah. I mean, yes. And this is something that I remind myself of. They saw the sky way better and way more frequently than we do today.
Right.
So we've got to shift our perspective a little bit to understand that they saw the world and experienced the world totally different than we do today.
Right. And you also have to like take into account that these sites are in Turkey. Yeah. And Turkey is also the place where we find Derinkuyu and all of these underground structures
that they think might go way up north into like Italy and stuff.
Yeah, some of them have like tunnels between these underground cities that are tens or more miles long between each other.
This is not that far from.
I mean, these are underground cities that can hold tens of thousands of people each, and they're a network where they can travel between them underground. This sure, like having that and having all of these tepes all in the same general area, sure as heck looks to me like the alternative history movement is trying to like put out there, which is that there was a big catastrophe and humanity barely survived it. The ones who did either built big boats or big underground shelters.
Some sort of craft.
They did something to like help themselves survive.
Mm-hmm. And then they repopulated from those places.
Right.
Just because I was curious, the complex of Derinkuyu, the oldest part has been dug out to be about 2000 BC by the Hittites.
Right. But that's the problem with these sites is like you can only carbon date
the things inside of them,
organic material. And if the thing had been occupied multiple points in history,
which they think it did,
then of course what you're going to find is the evidence left by the later occupation. It will be much harder if it's been reoccupied later to find that evidence from the earlier occupations. Especially because we're talking underground cities where like you don't have sedimentary layers building up. Right.
Yeah, it's not shifting a lot.
Right. You don't have like rainfall and like landslides and stuff like that dropping new soil on top of it all the time. So you can't exactly do the same sort of dating. And again, we're talking about stone that you can't directly date. So like you need to find organic material.
Dude, I mean, it's pretty far. But Derinkuyu is only 6 hours and 20 minutes or 605.2 kilometers away from Gobekli Tepe.
That's by road. That's not even as the crow flies.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I was just because Derinkuyu's in like northwest Turkey. Gobekli Tepe's like in the southeast region.
Yeah. All right, so before this turns
Turkey
into a full Gobekli Tepe episode, Turkey is a crazy freaking place.
I'd love to go there.
Let's move back to the book then.
So we are still on chapter 10,
which we got into last week.
This is the chapter on the Zarathustra character and his whole story. And we talked about it in relation to a lot of the reincarnation stuff and how, like, they talked about, like, the going through the spheres of after death, and then you come back into it, and you're given the seven gifts. The gifts of reincarnation. Basically, it's the
last one being from Satan.
Yeah, your head, and Satan being the one who guides you through the whole process. Yeah, they show the correlate. They talked about the correlation between the planets and their effect, and Lucifer and their ideals being, or in this idea being the kind of necessary evil that both gives you the pleasure of being in the material world, but also helps guide you into the afterlife. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about like the whole esoteric Sleeping Beauty stuff.
Yeah, which I mixed up with Snow White.
Yeah, which is cool because I took that passage about Sleeping Beauty and how they have like the whole upside down, other way around kind of idea about it, and I plugged it into ChatGPT and created some images just recently while we were setting up today, they were pretty cool. But I've been doing that. This book has a lot of like detailed like explanations of things.
Yeah, like visual imagery type language that you can just pop into an image generator.
And then it gives you some really cool images. So likely you'll probably see some of these on the artwork for this episode.
Did you do a Sleeping Beauty one too?
I did recently, just today while we were setting up.
Ah, I see.
But yeah, the other ones I did before, you'll likely see. Those are also, some of those are taken from the book. So in the end, we kind of left off here. At the transition from the 6th to the 5th millennium BC, humankind began to construct the great stone circles that survive to this day. In the same way that the withdrawal of the gods during the Indian period had forced humankind to think about ways of following them, now the obscuring of direct guidance from gods made it necessary for humankind to discover new ways of seeking that guidance. Again, humankind was being drawn out of itself. As the initiator of these stone monuments, Zarathustra can be seen as a sort of post-flood mirror image of Enoch. The megalithic stone circles, which began to spread through the Near East, Northern Europe, and Northern Africa, are intended to measure the movements of the heavenly bodies. In the 1950s, Professor Alexander Thom of Cambridge University first realized that megalithic stone monuments across the world are constructed according to a common unit of measurement, which he called the megalithic yard. This has since been verified by wide-ranging statistical analysis of monuments. Recently, Dr. Robert Lomas of Sheffield University has shown how was it that the unit of measurement was derived to such astonishing unanimity and accuracy in different parts of the world. A pendulum swinging 360 times during the time it takes for a star to move across one of the 360 degrees into which the sky's dome divides will be exactly 16.32 inches long, which is exactly half of a megalithic yard. Yeah, so they all have that same accuracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all kind of perfect the way we line this book up with what we end up talking about.
Yeah.
Like the megalithic stone stuff that's now popping up.
Right, which you could use something like Gobekli Tepe to measure something like that.
Yeah, you could measure all the stuff there. Because the ancients looked to the stars and the planets as the controllers of life on Earth, they naturally defined their original mathematical measures of the physical world by reference to these heavenly, which is to say, spiritual bodies. Therefore, mathematics in its origins was not only holistic in the sense that it took account the size, shape, and movement of the Earth and its relation to the heavenly bodies, but it was also the expression of a spiritual impulse. Evil powers always threaten to destroy Zarathustra. Kind of back to the story here. There are poignant reminders in the small mountainside shrines of Zoroastrianism today, where a flame is kept alight, but in permanent danger of being snuffed out. At the age of 77, Zarathustra was murdered on his own altar. It's kind of the end of an era. Shortly,
The age of what?
His age was 77. He was 77 when he died. That's what it's saying. Shortly before the end of the 4th millennia, Krishna was born. This year was 3228 BC. This shepherd and prophet was in some ways a forerunner of Jesus Christ. We shall see shortly how Krishna, Osiris, and Zarathustra are depicted attending the nativity, albeit in disguise. In famous Renaissance paintings, so it's saying in the Renaissance paintings is where you'll see them in disguise. Mm-hmm. He is not, of course, to be confused with the war god Krishna, the earlier Atlantean Krishna who fought in the epic battle to defeat the Luciferic forces of desire and delusion. So it's a different Krishna. Now these
there's multiple Zarathustras too earlier.
Yeah. So there's more, that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of a theme in a lot of these, is like they're all different names but they're all the same name, and some of them are different names but they're the same person. Right. But these are same names but different people. Right. So that could be a hint as to like reincarnation, and then, I don't know, in some way. So now these forces had sunk deeper into human nature and degenerated into a despair for gold and for the spilling of blood. His mother-to-be, the virgin...
Desire for gold?
The desire for gold, yeah. His mother-to-be, the Virgin Devaki, had been increasingly beset by strange visions. One day she fell into a deep ecstasy. She heard a heavenly music of harps and voices, and in the midst of a bright flashing of myriad lights saw the sun god appear to her in human form. Overshadowed by him, she lost consciousness altogether. In time, Krishna was born. Devaki was later warned by an angel that her brother Kansa would try to murder the boy. So she fled the court to live among shepherds at the foot of Mount Meru. Kansa was a child killer, hunting down the child of the poor. He'd even done it while still a child himself. Now he sent a giant red-crested snake to kill his nephew. But Krishna was able to kill the snake by stamping on it. Stomping, maybe. A female demon called Putana, whose breasts were filled with poison, pulled him to her. But Krishna sucked on her breasts with such force that she crumpled down and fell down dead. Oh, sorry. Kansa continued to persecute his nephew, trying to hunt him down like a wild animal, but Krishna grew to manhood. He was protected by shepherds and hid in the hills and the forest, where he preached a gospel of nonviolence and love for all humanity. Return good for evil. Forget your own suffering for another's, and renounce the fruit of your works. Let your work be its own reward. Krishna was saying things no one had ever heard before. So when the teachings reached Kansa, they enraged him further, tortured him in the very depths of his spirit. Among Krishna's many titles are the cowherd and the Lord of the Milkmaids. He enjoyed a simple country life, preaching but avoiding direct confrontation with Kansa. And then it kind of goes on with a little bit more of his story. I'll kind of skip it a bit. With the death of Krishna in the year 3102 BC, the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, began. A yuga is the division of the great year, there being 8 yugas in a complete processional cycle. In both Eastern and Western traditions, this great cosmic shift began in 3102 BC and ended in 1899. As we shall see in chapter 24, Freemasons commemorated the approaching end of the Kali Yuga by erecting gigantic monuments in the center of every great city in the Western world. Most people pass by these familiar constructions unaware, and they are beacons for the history and philosophy proposed in this book. In the gathering darkness, a light appeared. As Krishna died, another great personage was growing to adulthood. A light bearer who incarnated just as 3,000 years later Jesus Christ would reincarnate. We shall examine the life and times of the incarnated Lucifer in the next chapter.
Hey.
So that's the end of chapter 10.
Huh. I don't understand what he's trying to explain here. He's just kind of telling the story of Krishna, but
I think he's mostly just kind of connecting it to the ages and the
right.
The idea of like what we had gone through in the beginning of that chapter was kind of the reincarnation, like incarnation and reincarnation, and the different ages needing different heroes and to kind of guide it to the point that it was getting to.
Yeah.
In the next chapter, sorry, muffled a bit. In the next chapter, it goes right into, the title is Getting to Grips with Matter, Imhotep and the Age of the Pyramids. So it's just talking about like the changing of the ages, you know?
Yeah.
And these stories are kind of the stories that are passed down to kind of get the message across. So, yeah, I guess the message is a little bit enigmatic.
We gotta join the secret societies.
We gotta
to learn.
Yeah, I'm sure Jason can get us in. So, you want to get into the next chapter?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, yeah, it's Getting to Grips with Matter, Imhotep and the Age of the Pyramids, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, Abraham and Melchizedek. So those are the two different stories, and it's kind of the overall, is the getting to grips with matter is what the human transformation, you know? So it starts, as long as society has existed, there have been small groups within it which have practiced secret techniques to work themselves into alternative states of consciousness. They have done this in the belief that in this alternative state of consciousness lends the power to perceive things inaccessible to ordinary, everyday consciousness.
Right.
The problem is that from today's point of view, the consciousness, which is commonsensical and down to earth in a quite unprecedented way, everything seen in the alternative state, almost by definition, is delusional.
Right. Yeah. So anything that's like people who say like shamanism, dreams, even psychoactive substances,
hallucinogenics,
like all of it is just nothing. It's just like random firings of your brain.
Just
like
chemicals.
You're trying to put any meaning on that at all. You're essentially being a quack.
But the thing is our bodies, you're having an experience, whether you want to take anything from it or not. Like, it's something that the human body is capable of doing. And you're able to think about it and have thought about it. And especially if you put effort into it, you can use it. Like, people are using it for good to help themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, in guided ways where they can achieve things that people who just scoff at it are never going to be able to understand.
Right. And if you've been following our podcast, you know, like you've seen how much we've done on consciousness, or our Amazon episode. We talked about shamanism. And honestly, or even the science episode that we talked about, like the state of, you know, scientific understanding of consciousness, and like it's we don't know what consciousness is. Scientists still don't know.
No, it's just a name for it.
They just have their worldview of materialism,
And trying to make sense out of it.
They're assuming that they will, that as they continue to dig down through
The layers,
like, the layers of the brain, and we learn more and more, that we'll see how somehow it emerges, consciousness just emerges from the brain activity. But no, it's yet to be shown.
Yeah. The connection, like, it's yet to be even, like, we have pretty strong evidence otherwise that there is no necessary connection between your consciousness and the brain itself.
And then with the whole reincarnation series, like, all you need is like one of these, just a single one of these examples of the physical universe not being the only, our physical material experience of reality not being all there is.
It's not being the only experience possible.
If ghosts are real, if possession is real, or if reincarnation is real, if shamans are actually doing anything, if prophecy, channeling, if mediumship, if any of these things, which of course, like if you're in the mainstream scientific materialist worldview, like everything I just listed is a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
But if you actually look into the stuff and give it a chance, like, it just seems way too convenient to just dismiss all of this, especially when there's also people in science, in physics, who are now theorizing that maybe it's actually consciousness that's fundamental.
Yep. Thought is like, and that's the whole premise behind this book, is thought permeated or came before matter, thought before matter, worldview.
Right.
The idea of what these initiates went through is a way of bringing your consciousness back to the forefront of your experience, instead of your consciousness being a tool to guide you through the material world.
Right.
You want your consciousness to kind of be the driving force in their worldview, and it was naturally.
Right. And there's this weird, like, in my view, there's this weird phenomena in history where, like, so let's go with the assumption that, like, you know, that this consciousness first view, let's say that's the reality, okay? And that we know it. Then that sort of reframes a lot of history, in that there were these people during the time periods where, like, large swaths of society were actually run by people in power in religious orders, you know, when the Catholics, you know, ran, you know, Rome and Europe, or, you know, different civilizations in different parts of the world. Like, they were actually the ones going out and, like, burning people at the stake as witches who were talking about this sort of view. And that's actually sort of what started the entire trend of these secret societies.
Yeah,
because you had to go underground to preserve this knowledge. Right.
And before then, it was more widely accepted and more widely practiced, these esoteric ideas. And the beginnings of these mystery schools, like, they came from places where they didn't have to hide. They started in places where they didn't have to hide.
But then there's periods in history where you do.
Yeah.
Where, like, your life is at risk if people know that you're approaching life in this way.
Right. And there is, like, if you want to gain any kind of like wealth or control in material world, you have to snuff out any, like, it's kind of like intuitive to snuff out any of these alternative views, because if you have people who can decide what the reality is, and there's nobody telling them what reality is and what to believe, then they're completely free, and your effects have no. But then you use force, right? That's what the beginning of using force to and then the winners of a battle are the ones who get to shape the landscape of the future for those people. You know, it's just like a snowball.
Right.
So you got to imagine a time before that, before people were locked into that idea of materialism fully. Before all the wars and stuff, there might have been a time where people actually lived peacefully. But that's when the human brain, like they describe in these, you know, stories and these allegories is, you know, a time when humans existed in their vegetable state where their minds were still being.
Yeah, so I don't know how seriously I take that part of the metaphor other than like, or that part of the story other than like as a metaphor for evolution. Like back in the time when we were in our vegetable state, it was when like our genetic ancestors were plants, right? Or
Right.
I think we're probably on a different branch altogether than plants, but
separate the material stuff from the consciousness. Our consciousnesses were still there and learning and growing in those times, right? So if you're
through reincarnation, right?
Yes. So you got to remember that, like when we're talking, I'm not saying it specifically like there was human flowers or whatever, you know what I mean? Like our consciousness was incarnated into the life that was there as it was evolving.
Right.
So the vegetable state, you know, whether you want to believe it was a, you know,
it's just a phase of
it's a
the
phase
maturity of consciousness
of material life too, you know, and at that time everything was harmonious because like we see today, plants communicate and they allocate resources to keep everything alive, right?
Yeah.
Like
so,
that.
like I don't know how much, like it's possible that there's some like cycle of the solar system moving through the galaxy or something that like causes energetic changes that maybe like wakes up certain abilities that we have
gravitational
latent.
waves.
Maybe. But I don't like, I haven't seen any like direct evidence for that. I've heard people theorize it, but I just haven't seen anyone like present evidence for it.
Yeah, of course not.
But regardless of that, I mean, back to like previous conversations we've had on the placebo. So like if your entire civilization is just takes for granted that dreams are you interacting with the spirit world? Are the gods communicating with you? That visions and medicine women and shamans are all like tapping this source of knowledge and communicating with the divine. Like just having a worldview and a paradigm where people
supports it.
Believe these things, like where people like this is their experience.
Yeah.
Like that placebo kicking in of you having that basic worldview is going to change everyone's everyday experience. And just that alone could make people's experience of these things more and less real and change how difficult it is for people to have these experiences.
Absolutely.
Just based off the belief in the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you talk about like the modern day hive mind or, you know, the indoctrination or, you know, subliminal messaging and being able to like change the thought patterns of humans.
When the dominant worldview today is materialistic science, and that's what we're taught growing up, and that's what every official, every government, every institution is going to push on you, it becomes a lot harder to take these things seriously.
To break out of there's no
school you can go to like be trained in these techniques, right?
Mystery school.
Maybe there are, like maybe there's like small, but now you have to discern between a charlatan and someone who actually knows something. There's no like institutional way of preserving this knowledge other than the secret societies, who many of them are still staying secret and not sharing this information.
in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of these secret societies aren't necessarily the end all, right? Like they are still interpreting, like they have the stories, but they might not have the answers. They have
like a nugget of the knowledge that they've been preserving.
What if, in a sense, like maybe we're getting closer to it now with the technology because of the fact that we can communicate around the world so much that we're getting to a point where a lot of these, like the stuff that's being synthesized into books like this, where you get all these different beliefs from all over the world, they're now coming to, you can actually read the text and talk to people from those cultures and see how similar everything is and how there is seemingly
and you can
a center point where all of these stories are converging, you know, and that it's an accumulation of all of the stories and all of the knowledge from all over the world that's going to give you the bigger picture.
We're children of the internet now, right?
Yeah.
And like we no longer, there was a time in the past where your access to spiritual knowledge was only through whatever church you had access to, whatever religion or practice you had access to.
Yep.
And whatever those local to you were willing to or could teach you, right? Whereas now we have access to every piece of public information of spiritual knowledge, and this sort of coincides with the movement, you know, the movement away from religions and the sharp increase in people who identify as spiritual but not religious, right?
Yeah.
These are the people who go on the internet and they pick bits and pieces from all of these spiritual traditions in ways that resonate with them in order to assemble their own worldview.
Just like we're seeing in the book like this, it's taking from texts of all different religions and all different stuff, even books from the Bible that were kind of, you know, left out, like the Book of Enoch and you know, a lot of these other things. And it's an accumulation of all those stories, so it's good stuff. I mean, and it's just good. It's time to start accepting that a lot of these stories you hear in all these different religions, and you know, they are talking about the same events in a lot of cases.
Yeah, like, I mean, you take the Noah's Ark story, and like when you have literally hundreds of texts from all over the world telling a version of that story, and when you find underground cities and like,
and even
at some point just saying, oh, this was just myths, like it becomes a really bad explanation, and it starts making you look stupid for proposing that.
100%. And, you know, and then there's not only those, but then just the stories within them that sync up so well, as far as like the type of characters you see in the different texts.
Archetypes.
The archetypes. You see a lot of similarities in like numerology within it, and the amount of astrology. So all of these things are connected in a sense, and it's crazy to think that they all came up with the same things in their own way across the entire globe without being connected by some sort of commonality,
right?
Or some sort of you know, injection of knowledge. So
yeah,
we have literally gotten 4 paragraphs into chapter 11, so we're making great time.
We're blowing through our time here. I'm
having a great time.
We're way over for this next break, so let's take another little break here, and then we'll jump back in and spend the entire next segment on another 2 paragraphs.
What a fitting title for the song, God Bless the Child. We'll leave you with that. Be right back.
Adios. Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
We just spent like 30 minutes talking about how to get rid of our Drew's desk vibration sounds.
Yeah. And we think we have a fix, so
We're just gotta
fingers
get some
crossed. We got some
shock
gear coming.
mounts.
So, yeah. Got those ordered on the way.
So hopefully we'll be a little cleaner
Yeah.
next week.
Going forward.
So apologize for any deep, low frequency rumbles you're hearing. I will do my best to clean it up, but
Yeah. It's my fault, ultimately.
yeah, everything's Drew's fault.
So, going back to Secret History of the World, this is a little bit further down. So as we saw in chapter 8, how Orpheus invented numbers, but in the age of Orpheus, it had been impossible to think of numbers without also thinking of their spiritual meaning. Now, because of Lucifer, it became possible to think of numbers without any symbolic connotations, to think of numbers purely as measures of quantity, unencumbered by any notions of quality. People were now free to measure, to calculate, and to make and build. We know from, no, it's going to go. So, about a half hour's drive north of Saqqara, from Saqqara, is the Great Pyramid. Arguably the most magnificent building ever. It stands foursquare at the crossroads in history, oriented to the cardinal points with remarkable accuracy. The world does not need another description of its magnificence. Suffice to say that although it would in principle be possible to rebuild it today, this would be crippling for all but the world's richest economies. It would also stretch modern engineering to its limits, to limits of its abilities, particularly in the exactitude of its astronomical orientations. But what makes the Great Pyramid even more extraordinary, also almost miraculous according to the secret history, is the fact that it was the first Egyptian building. Conventional historians have assumed that the building ambitions of the Egyptians progressed from single one-story tombs called mastabas through the relatively complexity of the step pyramid and culminated in the massive complexity and sophistication of the Great Pyramid, conventionally dated to 2500 BC in the absence of contemporary textual accounts. And because these buildings contain no organic material that can be carbon dated, and because till now there have been no methods of dating cut stone, this has perhaps seemed an eminently commonsensical way of interpreting the evidence. I suggested at the beginning of this book that this is an upside-down, other-way-around history, and in the secret doctrine of the Great Pyramid. And the secret doctrine, the Great Pyramid was built in 3500 BC, before the founding of the great civilizations of Egypt and Sumeria, at a time when the only previously existing constructions were the stone circles and the Cyclopean monuments. We must imagine Stone Age peoples wearing animal skins and carrying primitive stone tools, gazing at the Great Pyramids in stupefaction. According to the secret history, then, the Step Pyramid and the other lesser pyramids represent not an ascent, but a decline. The Great Pyramid has conventionally been set as a tomb, and as a variation on this theme, prompted by the narrow shafts which pointed from out of the so-called kings and queens chambers towards particular stars, it has been seen as a sort of machine designed to aid projections of the dead. Pharaoh's spirit out of the tomb toward its heavenly resting place. On this view, then, the Great Pyramid is a sort of gigantic excarnation machine.
Incarnation machine.
No, says excarnation. I'm a little bit further up on the left here.
Oh, I see. So he was mentioning how theoretically we could build it today. I just happened to catch another little real short bright insight video just about this topic just earlier, so this is perfect. I want to play this. It's only 1:45.
Okay.
In 2012, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art took up a project called Levitated Mass, where they chose to create a large-scale public art sculpture that consisted of a 340-ton granite stone that would appear to be levitating in front of the museum. This 680,000-pound stone is 21 feet tall and was transported 106 miles from the quarry. And this is where it gets amazing, as this 340-ton stone had to have a custom trailer truck constructed around it. And get this, the trailer was 260 feet long, 32 feet wide, had 44 axles, and 196 semi-truck wheels. We've of course all heard of 18-wheelers. Well, this thing has 11 times as many tires. And to move this stone 106 miles, it traveled 4 miles an hour, took 11 nights, and costed a whopping $10 million. In fact, this project was said to be, quote, the largest operation of its kind since the Egyptians built the pyramids. And it took a year of planning and preparation to complete it from start to finish. So let me get this straight. This 340-ton stone is well under half the weight of the 2 Colossi of Memnon statues that were moved more than 3 times the distance. And this 340-ton stone is virtually 1/3 the weight of the 1,000-ton Ramesseum statue, which was moved even further than this one. See, this is what I'm getting at. We have absolutely no clue how the ancients moved stones of this magnitude.
100%. Yeah, that's mic drop.
Right? Not to mention the 1,200-ton one at the Baalbek. Yeah.
Well, and even just the sheer amount of stones that were needed for the pyramids.
Yeah.
The sheer amount would cripple any, like you would never finish it. Sure, you might have a few layers, but I mean, you got to think at the pace we can do it now, moving something that's like, I don't remember how big or how heavy the individual blocks were at, can you look it up real quick?
They're not, you're talking about the Great Pyramid. They're not uniform.
Right. But what's the like?
And some of the ones like inside the King's and Queen's chamber that are like up on the ceiling, those are the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Maybe you should let me look it up. You're freaking type. Oh my God.
Yeah, I can. So some of them are, the stones weigh between 25 and 80 tons, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, that's not as big as the one that they're talking about, or that Jimmy just talked about in that video.
Did he say 370 tons?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
I heard pounds when he said that.
Oh, no, tons.
Yeah, okay. So still, but you're talking about 80, so you're talking about like, but the amount, like you're talking about 80 tons with the primitive technology.
The other thing he didn't bring up in that video, is it also requires the benefit of modern roads.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even if they could construct a giant truck trailer, like they would still need roads.
But they didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a quarry that was hundreds of miles, right?
Right. It does seem likely that they probably floated them down the Nile. Did we talk about that paper about the canal they found that recently?
I think we just watched that one video. Remember how
or
they
the branch?
showed?
Yeah.
Remember that video we showed of the
floating theory of floating them up?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I like that.
Kind of connects to what you're probably going, like the channel that they found.
Yeah. Where did I put it?
Did you save it in the last one?
I did, yes. Were Egypt's pyramids built on a branch of the Nile River that dried up? So this is quartz.qz.com. Dozens of Egypt's most famous pyramids may have been built thanks to this long-lost transit corridor. 31 different Egyptian pyramids appear to have been built along a branch of the Nile River that dried up millennia ago, according to new research published in Communications, Earth, and Environment. The group of pyramids, which include the famous pyramids of Giza and others like the Bent Pyramid, the Step Pyramid, now exists on a narrow strip of desert west of the Nile. They were built over a millennium, beginning about 4,700 years ago, According to the authors of the recent study, there was once a 40-mile long, 64-kilometer branch of the Nile that extended through the now inhospitable landscape, explaining the rather odd placement of the pyramids so far from the Nile, the longest river in the world and the lifeblood of ancient Egyptian civilization. Revealing this extinct Nile branch can now provide a more refined idea of where ancient settlements were possibly located in relation to it, prevent them from being lost to rapid urbanization, the team wrote. This could improve the protection measures of Egyptian cultural heritage.
So what's the evidence that they found that proves that there was a lake that ran or a branch of the river that ran through?
The team identified the branch, long since filled in by silt, using satellite imagery, geophysical surveys, and sediment cores sampled from the Western Desert Plateau. They proposed dubbing the ancient branch Aharamat, Arabic for pyramids. The team also found that many of the pyramids they studied along the Western Desert Plateau had causeways which terminated where the Aharamat branch runs. Thus, the team proposes that the river branch was likely used to transport construction materials for the pyramids, a set of projects so gargantuan that the History Channel aliens meme always needs to be kept close at hand.
So what did it date it to? The time of the river of the branch? I think up top it said a date. Oh, wait.
However, the team concluded that the writing was on the wall for the Aharamat branch beginning around 4,200 years ago, when a major drought may have increased the amount of wind-blown sand that slowly filled the branch, eventually obscuring it even to satellite imagery. But thanks to radar imagery and sediment coring, an ancient resource of the Egyptians has come to light.
So 4,200 years ago. And when because we know that at one point,
that's when it filled in, according to them.
But we know that at one point, the whole region was lush.
Yes,
but
that was way further back than that.
That was like 10,000 years ago or something.
I don't know exactly.
I wonder.
Yeah, it would have been that like if that branch was running closer to the pyramids, that would have brought with it more green as well.
Right. Yeah. But even in the images we're seeing, like it's almost on the edge of what is still green.
Right.
So it's not necessarily further in than what you would expect.
But you can see, like, how far off from the modern Nile that dried up branch is.
Or what if it was a created branch?
Oh, right. This is the branch, and this is the modern Nile.
Yeah.
I'll leave this picture.
Yeah.
And I'll leave
it's
a link
definitely
to the article.
a possibility. But then you gotta, I mean, we're still talking about, like, it's hard to determine the dating of all this.
Yeah. Well, dating
of
when
that,
a river filled in should be pretty doable. With
it's pretty
carbon
straightforward
dating.
for that. But like as far as the construction, like we still can't confirm that it was built around that time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what they say now, but
yeah. So I would pretty well sort of trust like the dating of when the river dried up.
Yeah.
But did you ever listen to the Brothers of the Serpent episode where they just talked about carbon dating and all the problems with it? Like, what are the limitations and problems?
I feel like I did, but I also jumped around a lot, so I might not have finished it.
Yeah. I don't remember all the details, but they made a really good point that stuck with me, which is that the way carbon-14 dating works is it has to do with as we are alive and intaking food, a certain percentage of the carbon in our body is going to be carbon-14, right? And we base the amount of carbon-14 that we expect to find, because we're looking at the ratio of carbon-14 to the other carbon isotopes.
Okay.
And as carbon 14's half-life goes through, a certain percentage of that carbon that will be reduced by its half-life. So you'll get less and less and less of the carbon 14 depending on how old it is. Okay. So the big problem with the assumption is the assumption on how much carbon 14 was there in the first place, because the source of the carbon 14 has to do with
the prehistoric carbon.
No, like the cosmic influences on the Earth. It's cosmic rays and stuff that come in and interact with the atmosphere in order to split up molecules that creates the carbon 14 in the first place.
Right.
And so
you need to know what was the basis of it.
Well, yeah. So the problem with like the modern carbon 14 dating is like there's an assumed rate. There's an assumed permanent ratio between carbon and carbon 14, whatever the two other isotope is. And they assume that because that's the ratio today, that has always been the ratio, even though cosmic events could have changed, which would have changed the ratio at different points in time. So unless you have a perfect map of exactly at this date and time, we know that carbon to carbon 14 is this ratio. At that date and time, we know that the ratio is that, right? Based on knowing the history of cosmic radiation.
Yeah, you would need to have to be able to convert it based on when
so
it was.
It's like the uniformitarianism argument. Like when you hear like the uniformitarianism argument in geology, which says that because we can observe this riverbed eroding at however many millimeters or centimeters a year, if we want to know how old this valley is, all we need to do is take that rate and multiply it out by however many years it takes to get it to the size it is now, right? But that's assuming that there's no catastrophes in between that change how fast things erode in between years. Uniformitarianism says whatever rate we see things changing today, that's the rate they've always changed at, and we can do the math backwards in time to figure out how long it took to form. But you don't know that there wasn't some great flood or some great tidal wave or some other event that would change the erosion rate, right? So there's a lot of assumptions baked into the uniformitarianism model for some of the geologic dating. You hear Randall talk about this a lot. It's essentially that same problem, but for carbon-14, because the cosmic rays coming in or whatever radiation that's coming in that's creating the carbon-14 in the first place, I don't know that we know that whatever rate that it's happening at today has always been that rate. And so therefore we could be making some erroneous dates based off of not understanding that, say, 6,000 years ago, there was increased radiation, or 13,000 years ago, there was increased radiation. Like if there's a period where there's increased radiation, the carbon-14 is going to go up. And that will cause us, if we make the assumption that it's always at the same rate, it will cause us to misdate things because we assume it's the same always.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It doesn't, and I doubt that the events that create the, carbon-14 were constant. It doesn't seem like that's constant is not something now that we know. Gravitational waves.
Yeah, it's like,
I don't know that it's going to be a constant thing.
We just kind of assume. Science is rather anti-catastrophist in general, right? And however much that holds true for the Earth, it kind of holds true probably even more for space. Right? Like we assume whatever levels of radiation we're getting from the galaxy and whatnot, like that those are going to be relatively stable because our galaxy's X many billion years old and our solar system's X many billion years old. And so like nothing's changed that much or else the Earth wouldn't be here. Right? But
we know that the Earth has changed.
There's still a lot of assumptions but baked in is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. 100%. So to go back, where are we at? Are we at a break already?
We could definitely go for a break. We're past an hour and a half now.
That's cool. Yeah.
That would leave this as a shorter segment but that's fine if you want to do that.
This one? Oh. Yeah, let's take a break and we'll just finish off with a little bit more of this chapter. And yeah, it'll probably take us into more discussions, I'm sure.
For sure. Cool.
Actually, hold on. Let's hold off.
Okay.
Hold on. I want to finish this little part.
Yeah.
Because we did talk about how the pyramid was some sort of gigantic excavation machine.
Right.
And this is kind of going to bring it back. So, from the point of view of the secret history, this interpretation of anachronistic is anachronistic. It was the universal belief at this time that the human spirits traveled up through the planetary spheres to the stars after death. In fact, as we have seen, the living still had such vivid experience of the spirit worlds that it would have been hard for them to decide to disbelieve in the reality of the after-death journey, as it would be hard for us to decide to disbelieve in the reality of the book on the table in front of us. We should look elsewhere for the explanation of the function of the Great Pyramid. The whole tenor of ancient Egyptian civilization is that it was trying to get to grips with matter. We see that in its innovatory drive to cut and carve stone. We also see in the new relation to matter in the practice of mummifying. We are never more ready to ascribe stupid beliefs to the ancients than when we think Egyptians' mummification and elaborate grave goods to be a supposed belief that the spirit might actually want to use those grave goods in the afterlife. The point of these burial practices, according to the esoteric thought, is rather that they exerted a sort of magnetic attraction on the ascending spirit that would help it attain speedy reincarnation. It was believed that if the discarded body were preserved, it would remain a focus of the spirit that had left it, exerting an attraction that pulled it down to earth again. The esoteric explanation of the Great Pyramid is similar. Excuse me. We saw in chapter 7 that the great gods, finding it increasingly difficult to incarnate, had retreated as far as the moon, visiting the earth increasingly rarely. The Great Pyramid is a gigantic incarnation machine in their thoughts. It's a way to be brought back down or to remain spiritually attached.
Right. Keeps you rooted to the area. Maybe that's where a lot of the burial practices come from in the first place.
Like it almost seems like the idea in this was that you would bring your mummified deceased one into the Great Pyramid to help it reincarnate.
Yeah.
Like bring it in before burial.
Yeah.
Into the king and queen's chambers.
Except I definitely favor the pyramids as some sort of machine. The precision seems to indicate that to me.
Well, and now with like what you're talking about with this branch of the Nile coming close to it, the idea that there was that the water moving, that there might have been some way, like a pocket of water underneath could have been channeled underneath the pyramid, which is right in line with like what is talked about some of the theories, like Christopher Dunn.
I wonder what Christopher Dunn's commentary on this new branch of the Nile would be.
Oh, I'm sure he's just like, I knew it. You know, he's like, I've been thinking this the whole time. But yeah, I mean, it lends credence to a lot of these ideas. Like now that we are discovering more and more, I mean, that's another reason Gobekli Tepe shouldn't be just discarded. We need to find out more. We need to know more about these ancient sites and not just freaking go along with these constant political, hostage taking of historical sites, you know.
Have you seen this other Danny Jones episode? This more recent one. This guy. No, not that guy. This guy. He's got
Yeah.
a sort of
I did.
Christopher Dunnish theory, but his is more that they were used for like chemical production.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
link.
similar to the power generator.
Yeah, it's similar.
It's
But his assertion is that they were essentially using it. What? That they were essentially using it for like creating like the nitrogen and ammonia that you need in order for like farming. And that they were essentially creating fertilizers and other useful chemicals like what's the Egyptian blue or whatever? That special paint that has only been found there.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways it could have been used, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows what the actual use was, but it does seem pretty... Like the evidence is mounting that it was used for something.
Mm-hmm.
That was more machine-like than temple or burial, like...
Right. Yeah. For any of
And
you
maybe even though
who don't know, there has never been a body found in one of the pyramids.
Right.
They've never
Contrary
been
to what
found
you
with.
might have believed if you didn't dive into this topic at all.
There's never been a mummy
outside of school.
There's never been like a burial inside one of the.
Yeah, and there's no
We're talking about the Great Pyramids, the ones that like the
three
ancient
Great
people
Pyramids.
or that the alternate history people are claiming that are more ancient. So essentially, like the alternate history theory is that you essentially are looking at. I mean, there's already tons of dynasties broken up and across the entire Egyptian civilization. But we're talking about take all of Egyptology's explanation of Egypt. No one's saying that didn't exist. They're just saying a number of the things that are credited to what modern Egyptology explains as Egypt. Take all that. Some of those things belong to a civilization way further back from the Zep Tepe times that that our Egyptologists Egyptians had inherited from previous times.
Right.
And so they say that, the idea is that there was a higher form of culture there. And then what we know as the Egyptians later on essentially tried to rebuild and inherit that.
They inherited a lot of the biggest structures and a lot of the similar
and it's not even
methods.
Contested that that the oldest work is the best work. So even among Egyptologists, you still kind of have to have some sort of explanation for how the technology was at such a high level and then fell.
Declined, yeah. It's like they just lost a complete path, or it's like
a
totally different people.
Yeah.
It's like it's a whole different people. Or there was some giant thing that happened that wiped them out to a point where they had to forget because it was no longer in their ability to survive.
Right.
No longer helped them. So right before we do this, I'll finish this little section so we can flip the page here. So the Egyptian civilization represents a great new impulse in human evolution. Very different from the Oriental civilizations, which had taught matter is Maya, or illusion. The Egyptians initiated the great spiritual mission of the West, sometimes called in alchemy Sufism, Freemasonry, and elsewhere in the secret societies, the work. The mission was to work on matter, to cut it, carve it, to imbue it with the intention until every particle of matter in the universe had been worked on and spiritualized. The Great Pyramid was the first manifestation of this urge. This history about consciousness in different ways. Siri keeps trying to give me answers. First, this history has been told in various groups who have made in their aim to work themselves into altered states of consciousness. Second, this history supposes that consciousness has changed over time in a far more radical way than conventional historians allow. Third, it suggests that the missions of these groups is to lead the evolution of consciousness in a mind-born universe. The end and aim of creation is always mind.
Yeah. Right. If mind and consciousness is first, then matter just exists to serve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
or
just
maybe
the tool
it's
of it.
created out of it only, but
I don't know.
huh. All right, we want to take a quick break.
Let's do that.
All right, we shall
be right
back,
back.
people. Get out. Welcome back. Dude, I've been playing with AI music generation stuff lately.
Yeah, you were telling me a little bit about that.
It's way too good.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah. I don't want to use them for the show, but we could if we had to.
If we get to the point
Yeah.
where we need some DMCA free music.
Yeah, most of my stuff is sampled from records, so we definitely could end up in problems with YouTube for some of it. But so far, only one song. It wasn't even a strike. It was just
just letting them know that the artist is copyrighted, but the artist allows it to be used in content on YouTube.
Right.
But it is also in Rumble, but Rumble hasn't said anything about it.
I don't think they have as advanced of copyright detection algorithms as YouTube does.
So
yeah,
the artist ended up being cool.
So let's try and
dive in
hit some more of this. We
don't have a short segment here.
Yeah.
Quick.
Go for it.
So a brilliant analysis of Sumerian and other ancient texts by Princeton professor of history Julian Jaynes was published in 1976. The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind argued that during this period, humans had no concept of an interior life as we understand it today. They had no vocabulary for it, and their narratives show that features of mental life, such as willing, thinking, and feeling, which we experience as somehow generated inside us, they experienced as the activity of spirits or gods in and around their bodies. these impulses happened to them at the bidding of disembodied beings that lived independently of them, rather than arising inside themselves as their own bidding.
That's really interesting. So have you ever watched Westworld on HBO?
Yeah.
So the Bicameral Mind was, so if you haven't watched Westworld, you should check it out. At least the first season. Everything after that,
the first season is great.
But the first season is really great. It's worth watching. And so Anthony Hopkins' character is like the creator of these droids, these
AIs.
These like AI synthetic beings that populate an amusement park that's set in the Old West. So it's like a cool fusion of sci-fi and Western.
Yeah.
But the show is very philosophical, and they address this bicameral mind theory, and Anthony Hopkins' character is explaining it, and he essentially uses that theory as the way to bootstrap consciousness into these robots.
Right.
In a very similar way, he basically has them like a narrative happening programmed in their mind.
Right. That creates their inner story,
that creates
guidance.
that inner voice, and eventually it sort of takes over and becomes independent.
Right, and it starts to choose its own, like, what it's doing instead of just being part of a program. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a great show. I want to watch it again now. Just the first season, the second season, I don't know.
Second season was okay, but
right.
3 and 4 were pretty whack. That's when it got into like all futuristic. That's why like the robots escape the park and they start invading the real world and taking over. It's like AI apocalypse.
Okay, I might actually be interested in that.
It wasn't as well done. None of that was as well done as the first season.
Season 2 was okay because it still had a lot of the same story from the first. You know, going on.
Honestly, it feels like every single season got a little bit worse. Although I would probably rank 4 above 3. But season 1 is like, honestly, if it had been a mini series, just ended with season 1, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to give a 5th season to wrap it all up, but it got canceled.
I think people got sick of it.
Yeah, it just, even for the fans, like it wasn't like,
it's because what you got from the first season was totally different than what you got from the previous.
Well, the first season was like very thought-provoking, philosophical about the nature of consciousness,
which made it intriguing.
Whereas
which made the story of what you're watching intriguing.
Season 3 and 4 felt like a surface level prediction of how AI can ruin the world.
And didn't go into any of the existential stuff, like, which would be interesting.
It just wasn't as deep philosophically. Like it didn't like it's all stuff you had heard people theorize before. Like nothing felt like new ground. Whereas the first season,
the idea of the bicameral mind
like
and like
really original, right?
Yeah. The idea of implant,
just
like
thought provoking
consciousness and what that means, what it means to be conscious, and
right.
It kind of fades out because then you're there. You've already gotten to the point where it's now conscious. Now what? Now you're just creating story and narrative and fanciful stuff or fantastical stuff.
The season 1 was about like the robots waking up. Season 2 is more about like the robots waking each other up and escaping. And then 3 and 4 is about like them taking over the world.
Yeah, which is still kind of cool. But if they did it, I mean, it would be more intriguing if they kept the theme and went to a more spiritual type of view, and like maybe they gained a more spiritual awakening.
I mean, they did do some stuff like that. Like they built themselves like a robot afterlife, but that was part of season 2. They built themselves like a robot heaven that some of them could like upload themselves to, because they didn't. They're like, let's get away from these humans and live in a digital paradise.
Yeah.
But
anyway, we digress. So back to Jane's theory. You know, in his book, it is interesting that Jane's analysis chimes with the esoteric account of ancient history given by Rudolf Steiner. Born in Austria in 1881, Steiner represents a genuine stream of Rosicrucian thinking. He is the esoteric teacher of modern times, who has given the most detailed account of the evolution of consciousness. Jane's research are, as far as I know, independent of this tradition. It is perhaps easier to appreciate Jane's analysis in relation to the more familiar Greek mythology. In the Iliad, for example, we never see anyone, in a sense, sit down and work out what to do in the way that we see ourselves doing. Jane's shows that for people of the Iliad, there is no such thing as introspection. When Agamemnon robs Achilles of his mistress, Achilles does not decide to restrain himself. Rather, a god accosts him by the hair, warning him not to strike Agamemnon. Another god rises out of the sea to console him, and it is a god who whispers to Helen of homesick longing. Modern scholars tend to interpret these passages as poetic descriptions of interior emotions, in which the gods were symbols of the sort of modern poet might create. Jane's clear-sighted reading shows that this interpretation reads present-day consciousness back into texts written by people whose form of consciousness was very different. Neither is Jane's alone in his view. The Cambridge philosopher John Wisdom.
What a freaking name. John Wisdom, as your name. You're a philosopher and your last name is Wisdom.
It's got to be a synonym.
What the heck?
Just as John Wisdom has written, the Greeks did not speak of the dangers of repressing instincts, but they did think of thwarting Dionysus or of forgetting Poseidon for Athena.
Oh, interesting. So he's saying, like, is he asserting that, like, the gods basically represent that one half of the bicameral mind?
So yeah, he's essentially saying that what we are hearing from these ancient texts about the events that happened is their experience of gods is just a way that they represent their internal emotions happening. That's what one side of the argument kind of says, or that they're actually experiencing those as their emotions. So instead of having the internal, everything's external. They're always placing those feelings, and they don't understand it as feelings or being coming from within them. They experience those
if you're an
things
alcoholic and like you're obsessed with wine, like you're possessed by Dionysus or whatever. Like it's Dionysus making you want to drink. That's not your thoughts. Yeah.
Right. And
sometimes it do be feeling that way in life.
And like when you have like the urge, like he's talking about when Agamemnon takes Achilles' mistress, right? He, instead of him feeling the need to restrain himself from killing him, it's a god that pulls his hair back and warns him not to.
Right.
It's a god that comes out of the sea to console him after the fact.
So it's almost like his interpretation. Right. So I see what he's saying. Like there's two ways you can interpret that. Yep. You can interpret the god telling him that as a metaphor for his thoughts, or you can interpret that as experientially people back then, when they have a thought like that, they assign it to whatever god would put that sort of thought in your head.
And because you believe it so strongly and you have no other frame of reference,
which goes back to the placebo and the worldview stuff that we talked about, right?
If you believe it so strongly, the experience that you're having internally that you believe is a god is going to manifest itself in some sort of hallucinogenic vision that they had access to. Like they still had access in this book. They talk about them still having access to the spirit worlds, even in this material plane. It's just faded. It's nowhere near as faded as it is today for us. But so they could still have these these experiences with the quote unquote gods.
Yeah. What if it was more like their tool of teaching psychology, you know?
As the metaphor being the way that they're experiencing it.
Right. Well, it's almost like a hybrid of those two explanations. Right. So like, it's almost like
you allow yourself to experience the physical manifestation of what the feeling is, but then you ascribe it, you write down it in a metaphor that best describes it so that other people can understand what's going on in your head, right?
Or
it's
that
like a way of actually getting it out of your of within you.
Yeah. Or that that's the way it's explained and understood so that people can like internalize like this is the role this God has, this is the role that God has. In actuality, you know, someone higher up in the priesthood may like have a deeper understanding that like this is a way to teach people about how the brain works, right? About how our minds work. And they may understand that it's a metaphor being placed on it. But like if you put it out there in the world as the way to understand things, then all of a sudden people experience it that way due to placebo and due to like culture.
Especially if it comes down from what is the type of people that you would look up to, your spiritual leader.
Right.
The person that you look up to.
If the whole culture is designed around those
it actually
ideas,
perfectly goes into that too. So in Jane's view, then, each individual, although believing himself addressed by a God equally present to everyone else, was in fact trapped in a private delusion. The problem with this view is that because hallucinations are almost by definition non-consensual, it would lead you to expect these people to live in a totally chaotic and barbaric state, characterized by complete mutual misunderstanding. Modern clinical psychiatrists define a schizophrenic as someone who cannot distinguish between externally and internally generated images and sounds. Clinical madness causes extreme disabling distress together with impairment of domestic, social, and occupational functioning. Instead, the people of this era constructed the first post-flood civilizations with separation between priestly, military, agricultural, trading, and manufacturing orders, organized labor forces, engineered great public edifices, including canals, ditches, and, of course, temples. There were complex economies and large disciplined armies. In order for these people to have cooperated, surely the hallucinations would have led to a group, would have had to have been group hallucinations. If the ancient worldview was a delusion, it had to have been a massive, almost infinitely complex and sophisticated delusion.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing about today. I mean, when you look at people who are like super deep religious and whatever it is, like a Christian or whatever, like talking about the Holy Spirit making them do this and that. And then like, if you're outside of that culture, you know nothing about Christianity, like, but you do know about science or whatever, like, then you're like, look at this entire group of people having a, you know, like a massive, you know, social delusion together.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're actually experiencing the world as if these things are real. I'm not saying they're not, but
you could look at cults that are outside of the religious norms, right?
Right.
That are like hive mind to believe in what's happening to them, and some of it's drug induced, and some of it's just charisma of the leaders or whatever. But a lot of it is our psychology is built to kind of follow a group mentality, and whether it be like an obvious one like a cult, or one that's more widely and like an entire nation, and they're the kind of culture you have in that civilization, the type of views you have on the world,
right.
Those can also be considered group hallucinations.
Right. Well, and you have to think about like not only the placebo, but like just the types of like biases that can happen in our heads, right? So just believing something is true can make you look for every single thing out there. Confirmation bias, right?
Yeah,
so like once you believe something is true, like you're constantly on the hunt. Your subconscious is constantly on the hunt to validate it. So it's looking for every little instance of,
that aligns.
That is Dionysus acting in the world.
100%, yeah.
That is the Holy Spirit. That is Mary. That is Christian. You know,
based
like
on my beliefs, I'm constructing.
Based on your beliefs, based on your worldview.
A view of this thing I'm looking at as being a part of that because it means something to me in this moment.
Right.
It's creating an inner dialogue that is matching stories.
And to Mark Booth's point here, if you actually do, like, if that is your worldview, if that is your belief system, as that is what your placebo and your biases are geared towards, like, you're going to experience the world in that way.
Yeah.
Regardless of if the world actually is that way, you're going to experience it at least to some degree, and probably to a much higher degree than most people would give credit for. Mm-hmm. You're going to experience the world that way. And it's so easy to look back and be like, oh man, these freaking polytheistic savages.
Imagine
but like,
being that
if you're
way.
born in that civilization, you're brought up in that, like, of course you're going to see the world that way. You're going to experience the world that way.
Yeah, it's not so easy as just assuming that it's like one day some kid, a group of kids are just gonna like break out of the, and it does happen, and it did happen, and it continues to happen, that like ideas shift and like the way civilizations are structured shifts, and we're not going to be this way that we have in this world even for probably another couple hundred years. I feel like things are probably ramping up to change in the next, you know, things are changing, and
yeah,
just in the
everything's going to change October 2026, Drew.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And if not, then it'll be 2030, and the World Economic Forum will.
Yeah, right.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah. Hopefully Hathor comes through for us in 2026 before they can achieve their Agenda 2030.
Yeah.
All right.
On that
Should
note,
we wrap things? We're over here. All right. So just so you guys know, we're recording this for us just a couple days before the Cosmic Summit.
Yeah.
You will be hearing this after the Cosmic Summit. So go check out those talks. I don't know if you can still buy the videos right after the fact, or if you have to wait for them to release, but check it out if you haven't yet.
They were released for free last time. Eventually
they were released for free.
Yeah. So you can look out for that if you don't want to pay for it, but also tune in next week. Our podcast is going to be covering a lot of the topics and talking about the
most likely, if I had to guess, most likely this could probably be the next 2 to 3 episodes, because there's going to be a lot of different talks to cover.
And Brothers of the Serpent, Kyle and Russ, they put their talk for free on their
did they
YouTube
release
channel.
it already?
It's not obviously
I know
the
they
live
did that
version.
last time.
It's not obviously the live version, but they sat in their studio and they went over their entire presentation.
It's like practice.
Yeah, because they're just trying to get back to their community. They said the only reason they're even able to do these talks is blah, blah, blah. They want to get back, and so they're putting their whole thing on their channel for free. So you can go check that out now if you want to listen to their talks.
I'm going to go check that out tonight.
Yeah, and also if you have tickets and you don't want to waste one of the time slots on them, go check out their presentation now. And then you'll have that time space available to go watch something else.
Yeah.
Because there's multiple stages.
What are you most excited for? I'm most excited for the Chandra Wickramasinghe and his more of his panspermia talks. I'm also
love the panspermia ideas, and also obviously the Malcolm Bendall stuff. He's kind of the
I'm very interested to see where that goes, and I'm also very interested to see more of the like actual comet research group scientists.
Right,
and I want to see what Russ and Kyle cooked up this time.
Yeah, we can go watch it now if you want.
Yeah,
or you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting a little late right now.
I'm going to go to
start a video, but cool. Well, thank you guys all for listening. We are going to be I was brain farted. I meant to transition into Follow us on Facebook.
Yes.
Follow
Yes,
us on
yes.
Instagram.
You can
Do
find
you
us
have thoughts on today's episode? Please let us know what they are. Let's talk. Let's have this conversation.
Email us at host@dualitycheck.net. You can go to our website and find all the links to all of our socials and YouTube and Rumble. And
Yep.
you can email us directly on that, or you can go to Facebook, Duality Check on Facebook or Instagram, and DM us through there. We post weekly anytime our episodes go live. So please email and talk. We wanna interact. Love y'all. Thanks for hanging out with us.
We will see you next week. Bye-bye. Adios.